Phoenix Suns are stuck. Well, kind of. Starting away back from last season when they had Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, and Devin Booker all on the same team, there was really no defensive intensity. The fit wasn't good. The depth wasn't there. They had no center. They didn't even make the play in. So, of course, they had to blow it up. They trade away Kevin Durant. They waive Bradley Beal, starting again, just keeping our staple guy in Devin Booker. They retool. They bring in Jalen Green, Dylan Brooks, and then we're entering this new area of rebuilding for the Suns, no longer in contention as they were back in 2021. And expected going into this season, no one expected them to win past 35 games. They don't have a lot of draft capital. They don't have a lot of talent on their team. But lo and behold, they surprised everybody. They came out here and they even made the playoffs. Sadly, they lost against OKC in 4 in the first round. But nonetheless, they were ahead of schedule as everyone expected them to be. And you would think that their brighter future is ahead of them. And if they did this in their first season of like their new core, who knows how far they can go. But that's not really the case with this team. For starters, the Phoenix Suns basically have no draft capital at all. All of the picks that they have are heavily protected or worse swaps of like 5 different teams. So chances are they're going to be getting very much late first round picks, and maybe if they're lucky, an early second round pick, which you can still pick up some guys. There've definitely been really great players that have been drafted in that range. Like Desmond Bane has been drafted like at pick 30. Jalen Brunson was the second round. Josh Hart was also in like the late first. There's definitely great players that you can get in the late first round picks and early second round picks, but you don't really want to bet too much on retooling from that area. You definitely want to have something more solidified, more talented in those first overall picks. And then also at the same time, you don't have a lot of draft capital and really doesn't open a lot of trade wiggle room for there, because most of the time if you're going to go get a star guy in this league, you're going to have to dish out a lot of draft picks in order to get that, or at least some young intriguing pieces, which the Phoenix Suns don't really have a lot of either of those things. And it's going to be really hard to retool from that area and make possible trades without kind of blowing it up again. Phoenix Suns also have a lot of questions going on with Jalen Green. I mean, Jalen Green's a fantastic player. His highlights are incredibly entertaining to watch. He's a really solid scorer, but the archetype of player that Jalen Green is, it's very hard to build around a player like that, because a player like him is they have very high highs and very low lows. Jalen Green can give you a night like he did against the Warriors, where he was shooting rainbow 3-point shots to make the playoffs, and he's basically making everything. And that's really great, and you see that, and it gives you inspiration that maybe this guy can actually be something really important to this team. But then the next game he'll go out and he'll give you 19 points on 30% shooting, and he's just been shot chucking all game. And that's the type of player Jalen Green is. He'll always be available, but he's very inconsistent, and so it kind of really balances out. That's why you see him like averaging 20 points, because he'll have a lot of nights where he's scoring 30, but he'll also have another couple nights where he's like in the tens. And that's very difficult to have when you're trying to make a team that can contend if you don't know what you're going to expect from every night from your star players. So if Jalen Green is not going off every night and he's not able to hit these shots, he might also just dig you guys a hole that you can't get out of, because if every possession you're passing to Jalen Green and Jalen Green is going out there and missing and missing and missing, and he's having one of those off nights, that's basically a guaranteed loss for that game. But if, on the other hand, if he's having one of his hot nights where he's making and making and making, that's a really solid chance to get a win in that game. So it's very difficult with Jalen Green to fit around a team. And I'm interested to see where the Phoenix Suns go with this, because his value has sort of decreased from what it once has been as a younger prospect in Houston. Jalen Green blows up in the playoffs last year against the Warriors when he was still on the Rockets. And then he comes into this year on the Phoenix Suns, instantly gets injured. It's pretty awful. I'm pretty sure he only played like 28 games this year. He only averaged like 18 points on mediocre efficiency. And then he goes into the playoffs and he put up a big stinker against OKC, which is expected. They have the best perimeter defense we've ever seen, pretty much ever. And there's nothing he could really do against them, but regardless, he still shot under 40% from the field goal percentage. And that's not something you can really have as like a staple piece in your core. And as well as like, you already have your staple piece in Devin Booker as your star shooting guard. So you don't really need these two people playing shooting guard and the starting lineup, because now we don't have a point guard who can help run the offense and help get Devin Booker better shots instead of him always having to create off the dribble and take hard contested shots. Definitely boost up his field goal percentage, because I believe Devin Booker was at his best when he was playing with CP3, which is, I know Chris Pauls don't grow on trees, but we need someone who can set the offense for Devin Booker and like players like Dylan Brooks. And Jalen Green, I don't believe, is that guy. And if I was the Phoenix Suns, I would move on from Jalen Green. Another player that was involved in that trade, Dylan Brooks on the Phoenix Suns, has been absolutely fantastic this season. He jumps up from 14 points per game to 20 points per game, and he really brought a lot of defensive intensity to this team. Last year, we were all sitting there like, wow, this team plays no defense. We don't see any effort from any of the star players. No Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker. We're not seeing any defensive intensity. And it seems like Dillon Brooks really came in there and gave them a really mentality switch and really changed the tides for this team. And at the same time, he also came out and started averaging 20 points per game and giving them a great offensive punch. But is that real? That's my main question for Dillon Brooks. Is that real? Can he prove that that is actually him? Or is this something that just, every now and then we see it all the time with players. They'll have one outlier season where they're really, really good, and then they go back to being their normal, usual self the next season. And I'm really hoping, in case for the Suns, that Dillon Brooks is this real version of 20 point per game scorer, or at least in the high teens, like 18, 19, 20 point per game scorer, because they really do need that offensive punch. And I would love for them to keep Dillon Brooks, but I'm also at the same time wondering, we don't really see a contention window for this team. Should we sell high on Dillon Brooks and package him up to get something? Because his archetype is so valuable. A player that can create offense and not be a liability on that end of the floor while also being a great defensive player. Sure, he can get a lot of fouls racked up because of his defensive intensity, but he could be so valuable to a team. Even like thinking about him on the Pistons, he fits their identity so very well. He can create a shot. He could be another offensive creator alongside Cade, because we've been seeing the Pistons struggle with offensive creation outside of him. And a lot of teams like that would definitely be willing to bite and give a great price for Dillon Brooks. So I'm just wondering, should the Phoenix Suns really keep Dillon Brooks? Because there's so much potential with how much you could get for him on the market, especially after having such a great season that he just had. And he even played great against OKC. He was arguably the best player in that series, even though Devin Booker was the best player on the Suns. Like all year round, Dillon Brooks really rose to the occasion and was probably the best player for the Suns in that series against OKC, the best defense in the league. So I'm just looking at all these contenders, and they definitely could use a Dillon Brooks. Even a team like the Cavs could really use a Dillon Brooks, because they've been looking for a small forward pretty much all the time. So it's definitely something that the Phoenix Suns should consider. I'm definitely leaning more towards them keeping and trying to build out through the middle ground, maybe through free agency or trading a different piece, because Dillon Brooks, I really do think, brought that defensive intensity to this team that they really, really, really needed. I don't want to make this video sound like a bunch of Suns hate, so they also want to talk about the very important things that they have going right for them in the future. They did bring in a new head coach in Jordan Ott, who really does seem to have a lot of upside in this league. He seems very confident. He really, really changed the tide for this team. I think he also did factor into that defensive intensity that this team was really looking for. And overall, he's very young. He seems to be doing well with the team. There doesn't seem to be any bad blood. And I think this guy could potentially be a head coach for the future and a staple for the Suns organization, which is very important because I believe they still have like 3 coaches on payroll, because they fired a bunch of them after signing their contracts because they did not live up to expectation. And I'm wondering, maybe Jordan Ott could have had a different outcome for the Phoenix Suns when Kevin Durant and Bradley Beal was on it. But I don't know. It's something that we'll never be able to see, because Kevin Durant is already long gone in Houston, and they're also not doing too well either. So maybe this should start some conversation about Kevin Durant. Is Kevin Durant really the player that we really view him as in this current stage of his career? I believe he is. I think it's just like he's been in pretty crappy situations that and trying to fix teams that have a lot of brokenness to them. But nonetheless, Jordan Ott, a fantastic coach, definitely someone who was an early favorite for Coach of the Year. I remember the first half of the season, I definitely thought he should be Coach of the Year. Now I'd definitely be leaning towards Joe Mazzulla or maybe JB Bickerstaff. But they're nonetheless, Jordan Ott, fantastic guy. The Phoenix Suns also have a fantastic rookie in Kamen Malawach. He didn't get a lot of playing time this season, but I watched a lot of Kamen Malawach on Duke. I mean, he was one of my favorite prospects going into the draft. Him, Dylan Harper, and BJ Edgecombe, my big 3. I was so very much entertained with how Kamen Malawach was bringing that defensive intensity to the court. I think pairing him alongside with Dillon Brooks, this could be a great defense in this modern era, because I do believe we are in a defensive era currently in the NBA. I mean, teams like Pistons and OKC are the ones that are thriving, and we see Nuggets, who have an offensive superpower, being overtaken by the physicality defense of a Timberwolves team. So this is definitely something that is very important in today's NBA. So I believe Kamen Malawach could be that guy for the Phoenix Suns, because they have still, even though they've been playing Oso Ighodaro and Mark Williams, who have been really solid this year, Kamen Malawach has so much potential. He definitely needs to build up his stamina and get more used to the NBA style of play. But just watching him in the short burst that he does play, his defensive positioning and defensive feel is so very good. And I truthfully believe he could be an all defensive first team type of guy in the future. And he also has been working on his shot, a 3-point shot that he could possibly develop. Even if he's in like the low 30s, that's a player that could space the floor and definitely help your offense as well. And he's also a great lob catcher and dunker. And I really view Kyle Malawach as like a better, like he could potentially be a better version of Rudy Gobert, which is definitely a tall task, but that's where I see his ceiling at. Obviously, there is a chance that he never lives up to the hype. He never builds up the stamina he needs. He could be just not very high basketball IQ there. He definitely started later in his career, but I believe so much in Kyle Malawach that I truthfully believe that the Suns could use him and become really, really solid on the defensive end of the ball, and that could be how they build out of this current stage that they're on mediocrity. Because I don't believe the Suns next season are going to be very much better than they were this season, and maybe the season after that they're not much better than they were the last season. But this is definitely something that they could use to change the tides and really become a great defensive team. Overall, the Suns were really fun this year, way better than expected. I'm excited to see what type of moves they make, and I think they definitely need to move on Jalen Green. I want to see what that trade looks like because his value is really low, so they might just have to pretty much trade him for nothing to a team like the Kings. The Kings are easily finessed. I feel like you could easily finesse the Kings for a Nick Clifford, and they could build out from there, and he could be playing a bench role or even a starting role eventually because I do think Nick Clifford is a really good player. But overall, the Suns were fun. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you made it this far, please like and subscribe, and I hope you all have a fantastic day. Peace.